Welcome to Whispers. With the situation of things and everything going on around us. One thing comes to my mind, and that is Julius Caesar's word. Alea Yacta est. The die is indeed cast. Let's find out. Come along with me. Why Buhari lost Nigeria and why nobody may ever regain it. The die is indeed cast. Alea Yacta est. Nigeria's final chance to revive itself, to be fair, decent, and a just nation came in 1999. Posterity called on Olusegun Obasanjo, who came out of prison with a new lease of life, to do Nigeria the honor, but Obasanjo failed. On January 29, 2004, as Obasanjo was entering his 5th year in office, still pursuing shadows, Obasanjo was more interested in building a castle in the sand. There was Obasanjo, a president who had a rare chance to transform Nigeria permanently. But Obasanjo lived in El Dorado, interested in turning Nigeria into South Korea, when Nigeria's foundation is worse than Sudan's. It wasn't that Obasanjo was oblivious of the issues. Being a major actor in Nigeria since independence and coming from the southwest, he knew what the vexing matters were. But Obasanjo allowed his ego, massaged by budding oligarchs like Tony Elumelu, Cecilia Ebro, Aliko Dangote, Ndi Okereke, Onyekwe, Femi Otedola, Jim Ovia, Festus Ojimegura, Bernard Nonge, Fola Adeola, and others to blind him. Obasanjo inherited a country that was like a vast piece of land with active gully erosion sites. His primary job was to stabilize the estate by channeling flood water away from inhabited zones. In his messianic illusion, Obasanjo chose to use his 200 million shares in the mega corporation, the Transnational Corporation of Nigeria, Transcorp, to transform Nigeria into a nation of skyscrapers and white elephant projects. As the second term in office was ending, he was fully aware that he had failed. It made him seek a third term in office, secretly with the help of his cohorts and the public and private sectors. When that mission failed, he decided to unpick a successor that would have no chance of overshadowing him. That was how Nigeria got President Umaru Yar'Adua as Obasanjo's successor, and it was down the hill from there. Yar'Adua begot Jonathan, and Jonathan begot Buhari, and in each of these births, Olusegun Obasanjo was the midwife. If Obasanjo had done the right thing between 1999 and 2007, it wouldn't have mattered much who came after him. Nigeria would not have been overtaken by erosion as it is today. Now, houses, roads, and farms are inside the gullies, and some swept away beyond the country's shores. Yar'Adua could not have saved Nigeria because he was not predisposed to tackle such weighty fundamental issues. Unluckily for him, Hill helped seal his fate by wiping out any chance that he could have come to a new awareness. Jonathan assumed power, totally lacking the skill sets needed to surgically extract Nigeria's council cells that were fast meta, that were fast metastasizing. Jonathan would spend 5 years leaving observers with no doubt that Nigeria's problem had matched its abilities. Jonathan's ultimate failure set the stage for the far-reaching compromises that brought Buhari in. Buhari did not just feel like others before him. He took it a notch up in last Nigeria, and that is Nigeria's greatest tragedy. Buhari lost Nigeria because they suffered from a bigger messianic complex than Obasanjo. His self-righteousness, indignation blinded him to the most obvious remedies capable of extending the life of Nigeria. Buhari's allergy to diversity meant that he had only a narrow tunnel view of the country. It ultimately led him to the current end, where the tunnel is collapsing in his face, burying him and the nation in its wake. Granted, Obasanjo inherited a fractured country that had been ravaged by years of military misrule. It was a country with so many structural flaws that cracks were visible along its walls, beams, and pillars. There was no sense of direction and no purpose for the nation and its citizens. The country lacked the institutions to support any democratic initiative. The Nigeria Obasanjo was handed over was a country on its stomach. The recipe for failure was put in place when such a country was handed over to someone who had no knowledge and not enough courage to do things that were needed to be done to jumpstart the failed nation. Obasanjo was like a partially blind, partially deaf, unskilled driver without any knowledge of the mechanics of the machines, who was charged with the responsibility to drive a troubled car in rough weather from point A to point B. It didn't take 2 years before it became clear to serious observers that the man was the wrong choice for the mission. If Obasanjo was the wrong person in 1999, Buhari was the wrongest person in 2015. But in each case, the doctrine of desperation steeped deep into the fear of losing the country chew Obasanjo and Buhari up as the easiest of all viable actions for a country like Nigeria that loves the path of easy resistance. Obasanjo in 1999 and Buhari in 2015 became the default candidates. Obasanjo's job is not to give billions of naira to certified crooks for the maintenance of the refineries, only to spend more billions in importing fuel to avoid the shortage we saw during Abacha's time. His duty is not to spend billions of naira in Tony Anini's road contracts without having roads that lead to a brighter future. Obasanjo's responsibility is not to scold us for expecting a lot and abuse us for being impatient. Rather, his task is to provide hope. Unfortunately, Obasanjo could not get over himself. He allowed his exaggerated sense of importance to prevent him from achieving a victory for the Nigerian kind. The litany of crisis we're witnessing is the product of the intentional decision of Obasanjo and his cohorts in the ruling PDP to ignore the fundamentals. Basically, they made a deliberate decision to continue from where the NPN of the early 80s stopped, as if all that transpired in the late 80s and all of the 90s were of no consequence. In a more sophisticated way, Obasanjo and his friend embarked on a mission to plunder what remained of Nigeria's wealth, well-being, and welfare. The Buhari team had essentially followed the same path. They have plundered Nigeria just like all successive governments before them. Any other PDP candidate of 1999 who fought to lead Nigeria may have spared the nation Obasanjo's truckload of embarrassments, arrogance, pettiness, vindictiveness, and blatant ignorance. But working within the principles of PDP and with the certified criminals who filled its ranks and file would have also ended up a failure. As long as the fundamental problems of Nigeria, like the very nature of the union, resource control, judicial reform, relationship between the state and the federation, etc., are either ignored or shied away from, all efforts at reform, especially the half-hearted ones, would amount to nothing. The primary reasons why Obasanjo has failed is his stubborn refusal to implement a deep-rooted structural reform of Nigeria. Obasanjo, full of himself and trusting in his military drill sergeant mentality, thought he could order around a wounded country. Obasanjo's resort to patching the wall, managing one crisis after another, instead of tearing down the walls and rebuilding a nation, has become his Waterloo. His choice of actions or inactions is the style of cowards and men without vision. When it became obvious in 2004 that Obasanjo has failed, this was what we did. Interestingly, we had counted out Obasanjo and have plunged into a vigorous search for another personality on whom we shall hang our hope. We were once again refusing to insist on reforms that would guarantee progress irrespective of who occupies Aso Rock. For some reason, we continue to have the hope that those unprincipled men and women in the National Assembly have in them the right mental needed to chart a distant course for us. In our stupidity, we are once again betting our survival on some proven crooks, expired characters, and loud-mouthed egoists. We were pumping ourselves to be satisfied in the realization that any of them would be better than Obasanjo. Just like we once convinced ourselves that, come what may, Obasanjo will be better than Sani Abacha. We already made this. We are already doing this again. We are looking up to the National Assembly to amend the Constitution to take their mouth off Nigerians' breasts when they feed fat. We are looking up to the likes of Bola Tinubu, Nasser El-Rufai, David Umahi, Yemi Oshibajo, Atiku Abubakar, Peter Obi, Kayode Fayemi, Yahya Bello, Oji Uzo Kalu, etc. to save us from the words they created. The same words that they still depend on for their sustenance. We are again sure that any of them will be better than Buhari. If that is not a form of mental illness on our part, then I do not know what it is. The truth is that, unlike in 2015, something has fundamentally changed in Nigeria. Buhari did not fail spectacularly. He also lost Nigeria in the process. Nobody on the Nigerian stage today can save it. None. What will save Nigeria is no longer deep reforms, restructuring, repentance, and reconciliation. Unfortunately, the window for that kind of intervention is closing fast, if not closed entirely. Secrets that were once hidden are now revealed. Harvest giants that were once asleep and now awoken, and barrels of blood that were shed on the altar of Nigeria for decades are now choking the life out of the country. It is no more Obasanjo's or Buhari's grandfather's Nigeria. The honest will sting those who disturb their nest. No amount of prayers will stop it. Nigeria is beaten up, pushed down the hill, and the country is grudgingly marching down to the Golgotha. Nobody can carry its cross. The only path out of this valley of death is via reincarnation. In our own eyes, Buhari dragged Nigeria across the Rubicon. And as Julius Caesar said, "Allay ictus, to die is cast." Not even Obasanjo can say that. Nigeria still they can be. No. There you have it, guys. To die is cast. Nigeria is gone. We have new nations rising up from the ashes, like Biafra nation, Yoruba nation, the nations of the Middle Belt. So it's gone. It's gone. It's gone. There you have it, guys. I'll just leave this here until I come your way again. Bye.